First contact under fire. The silver spires of Araxis Prime burned against the purple twilight sky, their once magnificent crystalline surfaces now blackened and shattered. Commander Ilara Vex crouched behind a fallen column, her azure skin stained with dust and blood. Around her huddled the last 38 defenders of what had once been the capital city of the most peaceful species in the Andromeda Arm. Status report. She whispered into her communicator, her melodic voice hoarse from shouting orders and breathing smoke. East Quadrant breached, came the reply from Lieutenant Terrace. They're moving systematically, building by building. We have maybe 20 minutes before they reach the sanctuary. Ilara closed her eyes briefly. Inside the sanctuary were 2,000 civilians, scientists, artists, children, the last significant population of Araxians on the planet. 6 months ago, their civilization had numbered 9 billion. Now, they were facing extinction. The Vorn had come without warning. A militaristic hive mind species with exoskeletal armor and biological weapons fused into their very bodies. They didn't conquer, they consumed. Planets were stripped, resources harvested, and indigenous populations eliminated with ruthless efficiency. The Araxians, who had devoted their evolutionary path to art, science, and philosophical pursuits, had never developed significant military technology. Their defense had been token at best. Distribute the remaining pulse rifles to anyone who can stand, Ilara ordered. We make our final stand at the sanctuary entrance. She knew it was hopeless. The Vorn outnumbered them hundreds to one, and her people were already exhausted from days of fighting. But she would die before letting them take the sanctuary without resistance. The ground trembled with the approaching march of Vorn warriors. Their chittering communication, a sound that had haunted Ilara's nightmares for months now, grew louder. Her grip tightened on her weapon, a scavenged Vorn plasma cutter that had overheated twice during previous encounters. Then something unexpected happened. The sky above them lit up with streaks of light unlike any Vorn ship she ever seen. These were smaller, faster, and moved with a precision that seemed impossible. For a moment, everyone, Araxian and Vorn alike, paused to look upward. 7 craft, sleek and black with glowing blue engine signatures, screamed toward the battlefield. Ilara's communicator exploded with confused chatter from her troops. Unknown vessels. Are they Vorn reinforcements? Negative, Ilara responded, squinting at the ships. These aren't Vorn design. I've never seen anything like them. The lead ship dove directly toward the advancing Vorn column, and brilliant white energy lanced from its forward section. Where it struck, Vorn warriors disintegrated. The other ships followed suit, creating a devastating crossfire that cut through the enemy ranks with surgical precision. Ilara's tactical mind couldn't process what she was seeing. These newcomers had just accomplished in 30 seconds what her forces couldn't do in 6 months. They'd stopped a Vorn advance cold. The ships landed in a defensive formation between the Araxians and the remaining Vorn forces. Hatches opened, and figures emerged. They were bipedal, like Araxians, but stockier, encased in armor that seemed to flow with their movements. Each carried weapons that hummed with energy. One figure approached Ilara directly, removing its helmet. The face revealed was unlike any species she'd encountered. Brownish-pink skin, short dark hair, and eyes that blazed with a fierce intelligence. The being spoke, and impossibly, Ilara understood the words. Commander, I'm Captain Marcus Nolan, Earth Special Operations. Sorry we're late to the party. Your distress signal took a while to reach us. Ilara struggled to find words. You're not from any coalition species I know. Humans, Nolan replied with a slight upward curve of his mouth. We're new to this neighborhood. Been observing from the edges of your systems for a while. When we saw what the Vorn were doing, we decided it was time to introduce ourselves. A massive explosion rocked the ground as the Vorn launched a counteroffensive. The human's expression hardened as he replaced his helmet. Philosophical discussions later. Right now, we've got bugs to kill. My team will take point. Get your people to safety." Before Ilara could respond, Nolan and his soldiers moved with coordinated precision toward the resurgent Vorn attack. What happened next defied everything Ilara knew about warfare. The humans didn't just fight. They danced with death. They used the terrain, created crossfire zones, and employed weapons and tactics Ilara had never imagined. One human female moved like water, sliding beneath Vorn plasma fire to place explosive devices on their heavy weapons. Another pair worked in tandem, one creating holographic decoys, while the other picked off confused Vorn warriors with impossible accuracy. Most striking was their communication. Minimal, efficient, sometimes just hand gestures or single words. They operated like a single organism with multiple bodies, yet each displayed individual initiative that would have been impossible in the hive-minded Vorn. When a group of Vorn broke through toward the sanctuary, Ilara and her fighters moved to intercept, expecting to die in the process. Instead, they found themselves fighting alongside 3 humans who had somehow anticipated the breach. One human, a tall female with dark skin and fierce eyes, shouted to Ilara. "Name's Lieutenant Chen. Follow my lead. Aim for joint sections between their armor plates." Ilara did as instructed, and for the first time, she saw her people's weapons having meaningful effect. The Vorn warriors fell back, their chittering taking on a new tone that Ilara had never heard before, something that sounded remarkably like fear. Within 2 hours, the battle was over. The area around the sanctuary was secured, with Vorn forces retreating to regroup. Ilara stood amid the aftermath, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Captain Nolan approached her again, his armor scorched but intact. "Your people fought well," he said, removing his helmet again. "Courage isn't just for warriors." Ilara shook her head. "We were losing. We've been losing since they arrived." "How did you?" "What you did was impossible." Nolan's expression tightened. "Not impossible. Just experienced. Humanity has been fighting itself for most of our history. We got pretty good at it." One of Nolan's team joined them, a shorter male with pale skin and eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Perimeter secured, Cap. Vorn are regrouping about 10 clicks east. Drones are tracking their movements." Nolan nodded. "Good work, Reyes. Start distributing medical supplies to the Araxians." Turning back to Ilara, he continued, "This was just one battle. The Vorn control most of your planet, but now they know something they didn't know this morning. They can bleed too." For the first time in months, Ilara felt something other than despair. "Why would you help us? You said you've been observing. You must know we have nothing to offer in return." Nolan's face softened slightly. "Let's just say humans have a thing about bullies, and we've got some peculiar ideas about fighting for the underdog." He gestured to the sanctuary where Araxian civilians were cautiously emerging. "Besides, we've seen your art, intercepted your music. Universe would be a poorer place without Araxians in it." As night fell, Ilara sat with the human command team in what had once been a civic garden. They shared nutrition packs. Humans apparently could consume Araxian food with minimal discomfort, and began planning. Captain Nolan explained that while his team was the first to make contact, more human ships were on the way. Not an armada, but enough to make a difference. "We can't match them for numbers," Nolan said, displaying a holographic map of Vorn positions across the continent. "But we don't need to. Vorn are tactically predictable. They rely on overwhelming force and fear. Take those away, they'd fall apart." Ilara watched the humans closely. They were physically similar to Araxians, but fundamentally different in ways she was just beginning to understand. Where Araxians moved with flowing grace, humans were economical, decisive. Their eyes constantly scanned, assessed, calculated. Even at rest, they seemed ready to explode into action at any moment. Most intriguing was their emotional range. During battle, they had been terrifying in their focus and aggression. Now, sharing food and planning, they displayed humor, compassion, even philosophical curiosity about Araxian culture. 1 minute discussing kill zones and tactical strikes, the next asking about Araxian music and art with genuine interest. "We'll start training your people tomorrow," Nolan told her. "Not to fight like us. That would take too long. But to fight smart, to support our operations." "My people are not warriors," Ilara said softly. Nolan's eyes met hers with unexpected gentleness. "Neither were we, once, long time ago. But sometimes the universe doesn't give you a choice." He looked up at the stars becoming visible in the darkening sky. "Sometimes surviving means becoming something you never thought you could be." As Ilara looked around at her surviving fighters, she saw something in their eyes she hadn't seen since the invasion began: hope. And as she watched the humans prepare for tomorrow's battles with calm efficiency, she realized they had brought something even more valuable than their weapons or tactics. They had brought possibility. The art of human warfare. Dawn broke over the ruins of Araxis Prime, pale light illuminating the makeshift training grounds where Captain Nolan's humans worked with Araxian volunteers. What had been a cultural plaza was now divided into stations: weapons training, physical conditioning, tactical simulations, and most surprisingly, psychological training. Ilara watched as Lieutenant Chen demonstrated to a group of former scientists and artists how to create improvised explosives from Vorn technology. The Araxians, with their natural aptitude for chemistry and engineering, were quick learners. What they lacked in combat instinct, they made up for in innovation. "Your people are naturals," Nolan said, appearing beside Ilara. "They just needed direction." "They were never meant for this," Ilara replied, watching an elderly mathematician practicing with a repurposed Vorn weapon. "We evolved past violence thousands of years ago." Nolan's eyes showed something like respect. "That's admirable. But evolution works both ways. Adaptation isn't just moving forward. Sometimes it's reaching back to what kept your ancestors alive." He led her to a holographic display showing Vorn movements across the continent. "They're consolidating forces. Our arrival scared them. They've never faced organized resistance before. But they're adapting too. The next attack will be bigger, more coordinated." Ilara studied the map. "You said more of your ships are coming." "2 more teams, arriving within 48 hours. But even then, we'll be outnumbered at least 50 to 1. "Then how can we possibly?" Nolan interrupted with a fierce grin. "Because we're going to change the rules. The Vorn fight like a flood, overwhelming force in predictable patterns. We'll fight like fire, unpredictable, spreading, impossible to extinguish completely." Throughout the day, Ilara rotated between training stations, watching the transformation of her people with mixed emotions. Scientist Trell, who had specialized in quantum harmonics, now practiced close-quarters combat with a human named Rodriguez. Artist Kima, whose crystal sculptures had been renowned across 3 systems, was learning to pilot a retrofitted Vorn skimmer for hit-and-run attacks. That evening, a Vorn scout ship ventured too close to their position. Rather than shooting it down, the humans captured it intact using electromagnetic pulses. Inside, they found communication records revealing that the Vorn had designated a new classification for humans: apex predators. The Vorn Central Command had ordered all forces to prioritize human elimination. "They're afraid of you," Ilara said as Nolan reviewed the intel. "Good." Nolan's voice was hard. "Fear makes them stupid, breaks their hive mind cohesion." Later, as they prepared for a night operation to sabotage Vorn supply lines, Ilara finally asked the question that had been bothering her. "Your people fight with such intensity, yet you show compassion, creativity. How can both exist in the same species?" Nolan checked his weapon before answering. "Humans have a complicated history. We spent millennia trying to kill each other before we figured out how to work together. Wars, genocides, atrocities you can't imagine. But also art that could break your heart, music that could heal souls, and sacrifice that defied reason." He looked at her directly. "We learned the hard way that creation and destruction are 2 sides of the same coin. The same passion that drives us to create beauty can be channeled into terrible violence when necessary. That sounds dangerous, Ilara said quietly. It is. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once, but we survived, and eventually we learned to direct that intensity. Now we choose when to be warriors and when to be creators. His eyes softened. Your people chose to be creators exclusively. That's beautiful, but it left you vulnerable. The universe isn't always kind to beautiful things. The night operation was a success. Human-led teams destroyed 3 Vorn supply depots with minimal casualties. The pattern continued for days. Strike, fade away, strike again. Never meeting the Vorn in direct battle, always attacking where they were weakest. With each success, more Araxians volunteered, learning, adapting, becoming something new while remaining fundamentally themselves. On the 7th day, everything changed. Their sensors detected a massive Vorn battle group descending from orbit, an entire legion with heavy artillery and air support. The Vorn had committed their elite forces to crush the resistance once and for all. They're coming for us specifically, Nolan said during the emergency council. This is personal now. We've humiliated them. We should evacuate, suggested Terrace, who had become an effective squad leader. Live to fight another day. Nolan shook his head. No time. They'd overtake any evacuation ships, and there's nowhere to run. They control most of the planet. He studied the tactical display, eyes narrowing. But this concentration of forces creates an opportunity. Their central command structure will be with this battle group. Ilara immediately understood. Cut off the head. Exactly. Nolan's finger traced a path through the Vorn formations. It's a suicide mission by conventional standards. But if we can eliminate their command node, the hive fragments, finished one of the human operators. The plan they developed was audacious to the point of insanity. While the main Araxian force created a diversion, a small strike team of humans and Araxians would infiltrate the Vorn command ship. The human vessel would provide cover fire as long as possible, drawing attention away from the infiltration team. As they prepared, Ilara found herself working alongside Chen, checking specialized equipment. You don't have to come on this mission, Chen told her. Your people need leadership if we succeed. If we succeed, they'll need someone who understands humans. Ilara replied. And if we fail, leadership won't matter anyway. Chen's eyes crinkled with respect. You know, in some ways, you Araxians remind me of what humans aspire to be, when we're not being complete disasters. The battle began at dawn. The Vorn attack was overwhelming, plasma fire and artillery raining down on the Araxian positions. But the defenders had prepared, using human tactics of depth, deception, and mobility. Holographic decoys drew Vorn fire. Improvised mines disrupted their formations. Araxian snipers, positioned by human advisors, targeted Vorn command units with eerie precision. Meanwhile, the strike team approached the Vorn command ship under cover of the chaos. Nolan led with Ilara, Chen, and 3 Araxian volunteers following. They used captured Vorn transponders to bypass the initial security perimeter. The fighting inside the ship was brutal, close-quarters combat, where the humans' physical strength and the Araxians' agility complemented each other perfectly. They fought their way to the central chamber where the Vorn overmind, the focal point of their hive consciousness, was housed. The chamber door was sealed, protected by a dozen elite Vorn guards. As they took cover from intense fire, Nolan assessed their dwindling ammunition and the injured team members. We need a diversion, he said grimly. Something big enough to draw all guards from that door. Chen checked her last explosive charge. Not enough power to breach those doors directly. Ilara studied the ship schematics they'd downloaded. There's an auxiliary power conduit 3 sections over. If we overload it, it would trigger the emergency protocols, Nolan finished. But someone would have to manually trigger the overload and hold the system open. No automated timer would work with their security. The implication hung in the air. A suicide play. I'll do it, One of the Araxian volunteers said. It was Kema, the former artist. No, Ilara began, but Kema cut her off. My mate and children died when the Vorn took our southern continent. This is what I can give. Her eyes, so like all Araxians, held a serenity that contrasted sharply with the violence around them. You humans taught us that creation sometimes requires destruction. Let me create a future for our people. They couldn't argue. Time was running out. With quick, fierce embraces, they separated. Kema moved toward the power section, while the rest of the team prepared for the final assault. Minutes later, alarms blared throughout the ship. Emergency lighting flashed as power fluctuated wildly. As predicted, the Vorn guards rushed to contain the critical failure, leaving the command center momentarily exposed. Now, Nolan shouted, and they breached the chamber. Inside, the overmind pulsed, a massive neural network suspended in nutrient fluid, the central node of the hive consciousness. The remaining Vorn in the chamber fought with desperate ferocity to protect it, but the combined human-Araxian team pushed forward relentlessly. Chen was hit, her armor smoking from plasma fire. An Araxian volunteer fell. Nolan took a wound to his leg but continued advancing. Ilara, using a captured Vorn weapon, provided covering fire as Nolan planted explosive charges around the overmind chamber. As they retreated toward the extraction point, setting the charges to detonate, the ship shuddered violently. Something had gone wrong with Kema's power overload. The ship was breaking apart prematurely. Run, Nolan ordered, half-dragging Chen. The corridors twisted and buckled as they raced for the hangar bay where they'd left their transport. They made it, barely. As their ship launched from the disintegrating Vorn vessel, they witnessed the command ship breaking apart from within. The charges detonated, ensuring the overmind's destruction. The effect on the Vorn forces was immediate and spectacular. Without central coordination, their organized assault collapsed into chaos. Some units continued fighting. Others turned on each other. Many simply stopped, paralyzed by the sudden isolation of individual consciousness. From orbit, the newly arrived human reinforcements exploited the confusion, systematically neutralizing the fragmented Vorn forces. Within hours, the battle had turned into a rout. 3 days later, Ilara stood with Nolan on a hilltop overlooking the reclaimed Araxian capital. Cleanup operations continued below, but the immediate threat was over. Without central coordination, the remaining Vorn forces on the planet had been isolated and were being eliminated one by one. Your people are adapting quickly, Nolan observed, taking back territory faster than we expected. Ilara nodded. We're learning to balance, to be both creators and defenders. She looked at him. Will you stay? Help us rebuild. Some of us will, he replied. But there are other worlds the Vorn have attacked. Other species who need what we can teach them. He gestured to the stars, visible even in daylight on Araxis, and we've received word from Earth Command. They're formalizing an alliance with your confederation. This was just the beginning. Ilara contemplated this, a beginning born from near extinction, from violence and loss, but also from courage, adaptation, and cooperation, Nolan countered. Humans and Araxians together accomplish what neither could alone. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the recovering city, Ilara recognized the truth in his words. Her people would never be the same. They had been forced to evolve, to reconnect with aspects of themselves long dormant. But they had survived, and in that survival was the promise of renewal. Perhaps, she said finally, this is how the universe grows. Different species teaching each other, complementing weaknesses with strengths. Nolan smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his battle-hardened features. That's what we're hoping. Turns out, humans are pretty good at fighting, but we'd rather build something together than destroy alone. Below them, human and Araxian teams worked side by side, clearing rubble, treating the wounded, and beginning the long process of reconstruction. Where once there had been only despair, now there was purpose. Where there had been isolation, now there was connection. The stars awaited them all.